Welcome to Girl Talk. I'm Nicole D. Miller, author, blogger, speaker, hybrid book publisher, and your host. At Girl Talk, we are a safe space for female leaders to engage in healing and edifying conversation. This is your Me Too empathetic corner, where we have authentic and transformative dialogue designed to uplift and connect high-achieving women like you. Are you looking for a safe space to cultivate sisterhood with other like-minded female bosses? Leave your cape at the door and join the conversation. Hi guys, and welcome to Girl Talk One-on-One. I'm your host, Nicole D. Miller. In this next episode, I have the luxury of speaking to my longtime friend, Esperanza Gallon, fondly known as Hope. Esperanza is the owner of Hope is Here Counseling and Consulting Services and is a licensed professional counselor. In this conversation, we'll explore Esperanza's journey into finding herself in this profession. Because I know her personally, I've had the up-close experience of watching her become a trailblazer on this path of purpose, pivoting in her career and taking the deep dive into these entrepreneurship waters. What I appreciate about our discussion is that we talk about the different opportunities we can have to fulfill purpose that can look different than what society prepares us for. We also talk about how sometimes previous generations can only guide us as far as their experience allows, the need to transition from a survival mindset to a thriving mindset, how financial success can be found with elevating our thinking, and so much more. If you're someone who's found yourself at a crossroads in your career or life and need some inspiration, or you just value the need to continue elevating in a growth mindset, then this one is for you. All of Esperanza's contact information is found in the show notes, so feel free to reach out to her directly. And now, without further ado, sit back, relax, grab your favorite beverage, and join the conversation. Hi guys, and thank you for joining Girl Talk One-on-One. I'm your host, Nicole D. Miller, and I have a special guest today, a longtime dear friend, Esperanza Gallon. Now, you guys may hear me slip up and call her Hope or Hopey G or any of those variations because that is my girl and that's how we roll. But I'm going to try my best to be professional today, and I'm going to introduce her as Esperanza. So Esperanza, tell us what you do, who you are, all the things.
Well, thank you for having me. I am super excited to be here with you today and talk about the entrepreneur journey. It has been a wild ride, as I know you already know. I am a professional counselor. I have been a counselor for over a decade. It's going on 12 years now. I have my own private practice in Cincinnati called Hope is Here Counseling and Consulting Services, where I do individual counseling. I do speaking engagements on mental health issues, racial trauma, overcoming anxiety and depression, and I've had a lot of focus lately on talking about our mental health as it has to do with our finances.
Well, since I've known you for so long, I can say firsthand what an amazing powerhouse you are. And you're like one of those low-key powerhouses, right? Because you're very humble and you're in the helps department, so you're behind the scenes, but you do a lot for a lot of people. So first and foremost, I just want to give you your flowers. And for those who may remember, you've been on a few of the Girl Talk conversations. You were on the very first one.
I was on a roll for the first few, and then life was life.
First and foremost, I want to know how you got started in your current field, because I know you didn't just start there. So like, what major influences kind of shifted you into this pivot, into this space?
Yeah. So I was always wanted to be a teacher ever since I was a little girl, and so that's what I got my undergraduate degree in. And as I was doing that last stretch with student teaching and really being in the schools full time, it was a great difficulty for me realizing that what I was going to be required to do is not really what I had signed up for. Because I thought I'd be helping kids and helping them learn and prepare for the future. And the system was just very politicized, especially for black and brown kids. And I just had a great difficulty feeling like I was causing more harm than good. And so I pushed through, got the degree, applied for a bunch of teaching jobs, got offers, would get physically sick by the time I get to the point of like signing a contract that I knew I wasn't going to be able to do it full time. So I took a year off of graduation or after graduation, which was a super big deal because I got a lot of pushback, especially from my family of like, you just spent all this time and money going to school. What do you mean you're going to take a year off? Who does that? But I'm like, I need to figure out what my next steps are. And I knew it wasn't being in the classrooms full time. I did still end up being in the school systems like part time, but I never had like a full time, my own classroom type of gig. So in that year off, I did a program under AmeriCorps called Public Allies. And I was a legal assistant for kids that were in the children's services and involved in like removal, potentially permanent removal from their parents, and helping on the legal side with the Guardian Ad Litem program, which is amazing. They provided attorneys and legal services for the kids, not necessarily for the families, but for the kids themselves. And through that process, I realized there was another way that I could help kids that did not require me to be in the classroom in the ways. And so I did some other things after that, but that was the beginning of me switching gears to meeting other people, having other professional experiences that led me to become a counselor. And so that's what kind of got me into the field, kind of like my heartbreak with education and meeting really amazing people along the way that were also serving children, but in a different capacity. And coming full circle, the really interesting thing about counseling is that I'm still teaching. It's just more one-on-one or small groups or workshops and things like that. So I still get to fulfill that passion, but just in a different way.
I love that you bring up such a good point because I feel like our culture tells us you can only do these things and this is the way it looks. So our
Yeah.
culture, society will say, "Oh, you have the gift of teaching, you're supposed to be a teacher." But
Hmm.
that's not necessarily what you were called to do. Or you love kids, you're supposed to be a teacher, be a caregiver, or whatever. And they kind of pigeonhole you into these roles. But it can look so different, right? And so that's what your story really shows us.
Yeah. Yeah. And I also had no idea of these other opportunities that were out there too. So just having the right people come across my path at the right time and to show me something new outside of what I grew up with, because that's the other thing. I have to have grace for my parents. They can only teach me what they knew themselves.
Yeah, I understand that. I think of my childhood, and I said I always want to be a doctor. Clearly,
Hmm.
I do nothing related to like being a medical physician. But I realized I said that because to me, being a doctor meant being successful. So,
Hmm.
based on what our parents teach us, as you touched on, or that generation knew, that's how we define these roles. Well, it's not that I was supposed to be, physically helping people recover. But I do specialize, I think, in helping people with inner healing, and Girl Talk is a part of that through dialogue, right? But it looks
Yeah,
different. It's
exactly.
really different than anyone could have like trained me or told me to do.
Yeah.
I'm also like impressed that you took a year off school.
Yeah.
That's a
Well,
huge.
not a year off of school, but a
Okay.
year off after graduation of when everybody else were getting their, fresh out of college jobs.
Hmm.
I was not. I was going a different path. So,
Which is huge because I know some of your background, you mentioned about the financial sacrifice, your parents looking at
mhm.
you crazy. Like,
Mhm.
if we came from wealthier homes, that might be normal. Like, I've heard of the gap
Yeah.
year, like, people do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
For us, people with our background and the generation we come from, it's like, you better use this education, figure this
Yeah.
out. You got student loans. Like, you don't have
Yeah.
time to be whimsical.
Yeah.
That's how they would have looked at it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And so a lot of what I was taught was survival mode. And I have to be mindful myself when I'm talking with the young people that I work with is do I want to reinforce that survival mode or that really powerful introspection of like having your head on straight and thinking about where you're wanting, where you're going. How many times I have to have the conversations with the young person of saying, at the end of the day, your parents love you, but you're the one that's going to have to live out the consequences of those decisions. I hate to break your heart. These friends that you think are so amazing or do anything for you, if they're not being supportive of you and where you're going long term, I wouldn't make a decision of going to college just because they were going there or working a job just because they're working there because you have to deal with the consequences of that. And
Yeah.
I at least had that realization when I got to the point of being, like I said, the idea of being in the school systems at that time was just bringing me not even anxiety, just like a repulsion of
Wow.
like, I cannot do this. It was so high. Um, I just had the realization of like my parents wanted me to sign the contract. I'm like, I'm the one that has to show up and do the job every day. So,
Yeah. I
yeah.
think it's a testament of you caring about mental health, of you caring about your well-being.
Hmm.
When I first got out of college, I didn't get a job for several months, and I was
Hmm.
so frustrated. But in hindsight, I understand God was giving me a period of rest. I
Yeah.
didn't know what rest was. I
Yeah.
was
What's
just used
that?
to grinding.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now I'm like, oh, that was supposed to be rest.
Yeah. 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 Which is another luxury that when you
Right,
grow up in survival, you don't
right.
rest. You just push through.
Yeah.
Like, yeah.
So I see you as definitely a trailblazer and just it being an indicator of the path you were going to walk and putting your mental health first above what society or your parents were saying you should be doing. And you
Hmm.
listening to your body and being like, no, this is what I should not be doing.
Hmm.
Especially when you compare yourself to your peers or other
Hmm.
people around you. I struggled with that so much. I'm like, I'm at this standstill and everyone's moving forward.
Yeah. Yeah. Hmm.
But
Absolutely.
clearly, our journeys are so individual and unique.
Yeah.
So, what do you feel like has been life-giving in your field? What are some of the highlights that have confirmed, like, I am in purpose? This is how I know I'm in purpose.
Yeah. I mean, so many things. I feel truly blessed to do the work that I do. And I don't take for granted that, like, both teaching and counseling are fields of service where you pour out and you don't always get to see the outcome. I don't get to necessarily walk with someone like their whole journey, although there's a few people that have out with me, my clients that I have worked with them long term. So I feel very grateful that I have had people like say themselves like what a difference that the work that I've done in their life is, and I don't take that for granted. Um, I mean, all the way from a few weeks ago, a brand new client that I saw that got referred to me in the very first session, she said, my friend saw you. She told me that you changed her life, and I knew that you were the counselor for me. And I'm like, okay, thank you.
Awesome.
So that but the biggest blessing is really just being able to see people finally reach their goals that they have been struggling to obtain, all the way from people stop using substances when they have addictions, seeing people. I've had a number of people that finished their degrees as adults. They had time out of school or they went back to school for another degree. I had a client who thought that she was an idiot. That's even like the words that she referred to herself, and just graduated with her MBA like a month ago. And I'm like, yeah, girl, you had this, like, you're fine. And so just seeing those progressions and things that people think that are impossible, they're finally achieving those things, and the ways that they, like I said, one client saying, oh, I'm an idiot, and then I'm not smart enough to finish school. To see just how the shift in how people see themselves and talk about themselves, and the ripple effects that I hear too, of like, now my coworkers in counseling, now my sister is in counseling, my husband's finally doing counseling for himself. To see that, and them telling me, which they do, like, oh, I told them, my counselor said blah 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 blah, and this is what you need to do. And so that's really humbling and a privilege.
And that's really encouraging to hear you're making such an impact on other people's lives. And sometimes you get to see it and sometimes you don't. And so those are the wins. What are some of the difficulties? Like, one of my thoughts is it ever a thankless feeling? Like when you don't see the wins, or maybe you don't feel valued? Like, I'm thinking of my experience being a parent and just how thankless that is of a
Yeah.
job, because you're pouring in and pouring and sewing in, and you don't know if the seeds are going to flourish one day, or even if they do, will you be around? And that's what I was thinking of when you were sharing about your position too.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, the other side of it is that when people are doing well, they just ghost you. They just start canceling appointments. There's no formal thanks. I don't need to come back anymore. So I've had that over the years too. And it's like, because it's not like a typical relationship, I might reach out a few times and be like, hey, are you want to reschedule? I may or may not hear a response. Or I may just never hear from those people again. And so I hope that it's like, well, I hope they're doing all right. I hate a cliffhanger when I'm like, okay, I'm applying for the job, my dream job, and then I don't see you again. Well, did you get it? What? You couldn't have shot me a text, let me know what's going on. I'm invested. So I've had that happen. I also have had it happen, which is really hard because I hate conflict, but I have had clients that get mad at me because they're not really ready to do the work. And so then I challenge them, and they get mad, and then they don't want to come back. I had a young person, like teenager, that had some social anxiety, and so I was encouraging them, here's some baby steps of things to do to try to overcome these fears. And he just refused. He didn't want to do any of the things. And so he told his parents he didn't want to come back anymore. I asked his parents, well, let's have a family session, all of us together. Now he doesn't want to have a difficult conversation or face me again. So that was like a double loss, because also in that situation, the parents didn't realize them sheltering their child was literally making the anxiety worse. And that's the thing about fear. The more that you avoid it, the worse it gets to the point of like it will hold you hostage and you won't do the things. So so those have been like the thankless situations. My last couple that I had, and I don't do couples anymore, which was never really my jam, but my last couple that I was seeing years ago, like the guy like stormed out of the office and left me and the girlfriend hanging. So I was like, okay.
Oh, goodness. You have to be such a compassionate person because you're dealing with people.
Yeah.
And people be peopling. It's like, okay.
Yeah, they do. And I have to remind myself that. I remind my clients that when they're dealing with their own conflict in their lives, their coworkers, their family. I'm like, okay. Like, this
Yeah.
is what people do best for the thousands of years. You know, the scripture says there's nothing new under the sun.
Yes.
Like, yeah, this is how we have been, we are, and we will be. So some of us grow, but not all of us don't. And that's the other conflict that they have. Like, well, why can't my sister? I was like, because you're the one in counseling. What work is your sister doing?
Yeah. For whom much is given.
Yeah, yeah,
Now, the thing is, you're not just a counselor, you're a boss because you have your
Mm-hmm.
own practice. So lead us into your journey of opening up your own practice.
Yeah, that was a bamboozlement by God. So I had been a counselor in the community for about 3 years. It was extremely difficult. I was working like 50, 60-hour weeks, a lot of trauma, a lot of poverty, substance use, like all of the things. And so it was very difficult work, although rewarding. And so I just got tired of like how much I was working, which is also funny now that I'm an entrepreneur. But for that reason, I was like, okay, I need to find something else. And so I went and through a friend of a friend, heard about a job opening at a group private practice. And so I did that. I loved it. I was doing that for about 2.5 years. And then the practice got sold to a bigger mega practice. And the changes were so stark, like overnight. A lot of things that I really was having issues that were impacting client care. My clients were complaining about extra charges of things, not being able to reschedule their appointments the right way, and just a lot of things that really made my job difficult and even made client care itself more difficult. And so I was like, well, all right, I like private practice enough. I'll go work for another private practice because there's tons here in my area. So I interviewed about like 7 or 8 other places, and they all had parts of what I liked, but it seemed like there was going to be a trade off significant enough, like a shenanigan or something that I was going to have to deal with, that I was like, maybe if I hadn't come from such a great place already and I didn't know what I was missing out on, I probably would have been okay with it. I also, at the group private practice, I was getting paid really well, and I did not know how poorly the other counselors were getting paid when I was going at some of the other practices. So God just put it on my heart of like, you need to start your own practice. Now that was like maybe 3 interviews in. I still kept going because like, yeah, God, that's cute. But me, like, I'm not a business person. My dad was an entrepreneur. My mom was an entrepreneur. My dad was in sales, and I just saw how difficult it was. And my dad was really good at sales, and I just never was. And I was like, and in my mind, that's what business was, to be an entrepreneur. You have to sell people things. And I'm just like, yeah, I don't want to do that. So I kept stubbornly interviewing. And each interview got worse. And then I was like, okay, God, okay, I surrender. And then I started my practice in like 3 months. I promised myself by my birthday I was going to be in a different situation. So I put in notice and started behind the scenes, getting everything together to start my own business. And February the following year, I saw my first client. So it was a whirlwind.
It's so funny how similar our journeys were because I was giving Jesus the same headache. I
Mm-hmm.
was ignoring it and I was fearful. I saw my pastor struggle as an entrepreneur. I saw my landlord, who was my boss, struggle as an entrepreneur. I'm like, I don't want to struggle.
No, I don't want to
I don't want to do
struggle.
this. And
No.
I'm doing my interviews. One temp job I got, the guy who was over me, who owned the practice, I was a bookkeeper, said, you should start your own business. How you gonna tell me to start my own business? I'm working for you. So
Yep.
it's just funny that we were like running from it. But I remember when you started it, and I feel like it was 2017. So correct me if I'm
It
wrong.
was. Yeah.
I was still in my role that I had. And I just was in such awe, like, oh my God, Hope starting a business. Girl, I started mine a year later. Was trying to run
Yeah.
from it.
Yeah. Yep. Yep. Yep.
But I just admire what you've been able to do with your business, how you've been able to scale. Now, I know that there have probably been some disappointments and setbacks with the scaling. So, can you
Yes.
share with us like your experience and your journey with growing and maybe some of those disappointments and how you've been able to bounce back or view them?
Yeah. I've kind of had kind of the opposite issue that most entrepreneurs have. A lot of entrepreneurs, it's a struggle to get started. And where do I get the money? Where do I get the space? Where do I get the people to help me? And I was really blessed, I think, because God also was recognizing my stubbornness, that I was able to figure out a lot of things on my own or have the right people up front. And so when I started the business, everything was going really well. I brought 20 clients with me from my previous practice. So within like 4 months, I was full. And then all my other peers in the field were saying how they're looking for clients. And I'm like full all of the time, right? Like I just have always been full. So I'm like, I don't know what this means to just see like a few clients because I've always had, what I've needed. I collaborated with some other people for having space, which introduced me into having an accountant, and I met an attorney, like all of these things that I had. So I had success right at the beginning. And then, and then,
Dun, dun, dun.
uh, dun, 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 COVID happened. So that was a lot of pivot of how I did services because I was doing it pretty traditional, just in the office, and insurance and things like that. So I had to figure out teletherapy. I had to figure out a different style kind of counseling because teletherapy is a little bit different than in person, not drastically, but some of the things you have to be able to modify. And then I eventually got to the point of like I was ready to have my own space apart from the counselors that I was sharing space with. And so I attempted to buy office commercial property, and that was a whole hassle of went under contract, everything's moving forward, and the seller backed out and kind of took advantage of a small loophole that they had and backed out of the process. So that's not only sent me scrambling for another space after I had already left my previous space, but she also wanted to hold on to my earnest money, my down payment for the property too.
So, we're going to put a pin in that discussion because it was just too full to only have one conversation. Make sure you tune in to next week's episode for part 2 when we continue the dialogue with Esperanza. I just love how she had a background in education, which played out in her career in a totally different way. Esperanza had a calling with children, but it wasn't for a long-term position in a school system. Instead, it would play out with counseling children. She also talked about how sometimes she doesn't get to walk out lifelong seasons with her clients, but what makes her work so worth it is seeing the transformation and progression that happens for those she's able to guide. In this chat with Esperanza, she also shared how she dragged her feet when hearing God call her into entrepreneurship, which your girl resonates with. I too thought my BS in marketing limited me to just doing sales. And just like with Esperanza, the doors that were not for her remained closed for me. Can you relate? Have you been spinning your wheels trying to move forward because you thought your background and degrees meant you could only function in one particular space, one particular way? We can learn from Esperanza's story that purpose can look different than what we thought, especially when we have multiple gifts and talents. She didn't feel like she was formally educated in business and therefore would never have sought out to be a business owner. Yet she had a gift to be a businesswoman and the up-close view of her father's entrepreneurship endeavors. Nearing the end of part 1 of this discussion, Esperanza dives into the nuances of scaling her business. Sometimes scaling is idealized because we only think of the increase and the visibility that it offers. But Esperanza opens up about some of its challenges. While she was able to start her business very smoothly, the scaling proved to reveal some growing pains. Make sure to catch the remaining discussion in part 2 of Esperanza's journey to gain much needed wisdom received from life lessons that she walked through. Alright, that's all for now. And I hope you guys were encouraged and motivated after hearing how different our life paths can look when we say yes to that inner voice nudging us in a different direction. I know that's been my journey. Could it be yours too? But no matter where you find yourself in this thing called life and purpose, just remember, I attract amazing women doing amazing things. So guess what, sis? That means you're amazing. Don't forget to subscribe, rate, and review this podcast. To continue the conversation, join our Girl Talk community by following @GirlTalkCLE on Instagram and Facebook.com/HTOHB, where you can join the Girl Talk Facebook group. You can follow me personally on Instagram @HTOHB, on Facebook.com/HTOHB, and at YouTube.com/@HTOHB. Feel free to reach out via email info@indiemillerpublishing.com. If you're a writer who wants to take the next steps into becoming a published author, you can book a one-on-one consultation at indiemiller.pub. Just let me know you heard about my publishing house through Girl Talk, and I'll give you a 50% discount on our one-on-one. If you'd like weekly inspirational nuggets, you can subscribe to my blog and monthly newsletter at NicoleDMiller.com, where you can learn more about me and my writings. Till next time.